So first we have Ms. Dorothy Duguay. Dorothy is a graduate of Rutgers Law School, Camden. During her law school tenure, she worked full-time as a court officer for a civil trial judge at the First Judicial District of Pennsylvania, Philadelphia. Dorothy attended law school part-time as an evening student. She is admitted in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and the United States District Court for the Eastern District of Pennsylvania. Upon graduation, Dorothy worked as an associate for a boutique litigation firm in Philadelphia, where she focused primarily on employment disputes, premise liability, and personal injury matters. Currently, Dorothy works in the Office of General Counsel for a college in Northern New Jersey. And our second panelist is Ms. Claire Newsom. Claire graduated from Rutgers Law School in 2020. She has published several articles on law and technology, and she looks forward to a career in consulting and risk management. She passed the fall 2020 New Jersey bar exam, which she took online, and she's looking forward to sharing information that will be beneficial to all our participants who will be taking the bar online as well. So we're going to hop right on into our first question for the panelists. And we'll start with Dorothy, and then Claire, you can answer next. So when did you complete the bar exam? What bar review program did you use? And what strategies did you use to complete the necessary percentage of the program?
So I took the bar exam July 2019, the Pennsylvania bar exam. In order to complete the bar exam, I actually took on Barbary, which was the plan or the course that I decided to go with. And for Barbary, they guarantee a passage rate so long as you complete about 70 to 80% of the program. So for me, when I was studying, it was very important for me to make sure that I completed I aim to complete at least 85% of the program to ensure that in the event I did not pass, that I'd had the opportunity to be able to retake the Barbary course without having to purchase the plan all over again. So that's one of the guarantees that they give you. Some of the strategies that I used in order to pass was I was very diligent. I had a very diligent schedule with regards to my study time. But within those schedule, I also made sure that I took time for necessary breaks because it's very easy to get burnt out, especially when you're studying 8 to 10 hours a day for the bar exam. And then in addition to that, I would change up my study routine. So whether it be changing where I studied, sometimes I studied at the park, sometimes I went to Barnes and Nobles, sometimes I went to a Starbucks, sometimes I studied at the library, but just sort of switching up the vibe of where I studied so that studying didn't seem so mundane and as if it was an obligation. So it made it sort of easier for me when it came time to sit down and want to study. And in between the breaks, I also rewarded myself. So if it was okay, make sure that I study this amount of blocks, and then a reward might be I get to watch Grey's Anatomy for an hour, and then I get back to studying, or I can go and get my nails done, and then I got back to studying. So sort of giving myself little prizes, as I would say, really helped me stay focused and really helped me want to continue studying, because sometimes after a month or two in, it can be very gruesome. But as long as you stick with it, you'll get there.
Okay, and Claire, how about you?
Okay, so my experience was definitely a little bit different than hopefully your experience will be, because I did study when the pandemic was I studied last year. I passed the fall 2020 bar. So I did study when the pandemic was kind of shifting things around. We got to push back a couple of times. But I will say that the best study strategy was practicing how you play. And whenever there's an assignment, just sit down and take it exactly in a similar condition as if you were taking it in the like on actual like game day, on the day where you actually take the exam. And then so the second thing I would say is it's more of a mental thing than anything. I use Barbary and I supplemented with critical pass flashcards, but you can also make your own flashcards if you don't want to spend the money on the critical pass flashcards. And also you can use older versions. Like I used a 2017 version and they were essentially the same as the 2020 version. So if you know someone who has old ones, then you can also use that. But I would definitely say like, make sure that mentally you are like taking care of yourself, because fundamentally the bar is a mental thing. You will have all the tools like right in front of you to pass, like you definitely can do it, but it's more about, you know, making sure that you can perform, which means taking care of yourself. And the other thing is, I would definitely take some pressure off of yourself, because if you don't pass the first time, like that's okay. And, you know, I think with the bar, it's not just the subject matter, but it's also things like imposter syndrome. And, you know, it's been hyped to you for 3 years or more if you've like been around the legal profession at all. So that's going to be a really large part of it. So I think keeping that in check and like, you know, hyping yourself up, realizing how awesome you are for making it through 3 years of law school or 4 years of law school or however many years of law school you did is going to be important as well.
Thank you. Now, Claire, you actually mentioned that it's more than just the subject, which brings us right into our next question, which is about the test subjects as well as formats. So what part of the bar exam, be it the topic or test format, did you focus most of your attention on? And how did you address studying for struggle areas or areas of difficulty?
So most of the programs will actually like track your struggle areas and give you more subject matter, give you more options to do within those areas. But I think I really supplemented with flashcards, you know, whether they're going to be your critical pass cards or whether they're going to be flashcards you made on your own. I did notice that I had some certain struggle areas, but I also had certain struggle assignments that came within this prep course. And I eventually ended up just setting those aside and doing something else. So for example, in Barbary, they're going to give you something called the Convisor mini review. And that for me was just impossible to get through. I wasn't retaining anything. They didn't give me enough time to read it. Like I'm kind of a slow reader. And so that ended up being more stressful for me than it was worth. And it goes into more detail. So what I ended up doing was just doing critical pass note cards instead. And so dealing with like struggle topics, but also struggle like assignments and being flexible around that, I think is going to be important.
And how about you, Dorothy?
For me, going in and studying Barbary, I already knew my weaknesses were property and some areas of con law. And in terms of what portions of the bar exam that I knew I was going to struggle with was most multiple choice. When it comes out to writing, the MEs, the essay questions, and the MPTs, those I was able to breeze through those, because as long as I can explain my answer, I know what the law is. I know what the black letter law is. I know how to do an analysis. So writing, I've always been very good at writing. So I was able to write out my answers. But when you give me too many choices, I start to second guess myself. I'll know what the answer is initially, and then I'll go back and I'm like, okay, wait, it could be this and it could be that. And then I fluster myself. So for me, it was really important that I took as many multiple choice questions as I could, just to make sure and to build confidence in myself, to know that, okay, you answered it correctly when you picked the answer the first time. Don't second guess yourself. And in addition to doing that was with Barbary, when you do the multiple choice questions, they'll give you the rationale, the reason why this question was wrong, the reason why this question was, the reason why this answer was wrong, the reason why this answer was correct, and so on and so on and so on. So for me, it was very important to make sure that after I answer the questions, even if I got the question right, to go back and read the rationale to understand why I got that question right in the first place. And as Claire already mentioned, with Barbary, when you go through the platform and you go through the program, they already start to see what areas are areas that you need to practice on. So they'll give you maybe more multiple choice questions on property, or more multiple questions, not necessarily just property, but if it's adverse possession, like you have a hard time with that, they'll give you more questions with regards to that. So it was very important for me to make sure that I realized quickly early on what my weaknesses were, and then to continue to build on those. So every day, because the way Barbary works is you'll start off with one area, and then you'll continue to build on, and it'll continue to question you and test you on the areas that you may have already studied to make sure that it was fresh in your mind. But on top of doing those, I would always go back and study more on the things that I knew that I needed to sort of really try and strengthen myself. So like I said, for me, it was property and some areas of con law. So even after I did torts, I would go back and just do a couple multiple choice questions with property, just to make sure that I was retaining the information that I was actually learning. And Barbary, in addition, is also very good at explaining to you sort of strategy. A lot of the times, if you're going to read a question, if all of the answers are no, 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 and you have the one yes, then sometimes it may be the one yes. Or, if you have a lot of times when they ask you this kind of question, these are the answers that they're going to give you, and these are going to be wrong, just to keep that in mind. So I made sure that I really focused in on the strategies that Barbary prepped us with, and also going back and just focusing on the areas that I knew I needed to work on, which was for me multiple choice. I cannot do multiple choice, like at all, at all.
Okay, so one of the things you actually mentioned, Dorothy, was being very strict about your time. So can you two go a little bit more into how did you manage your time during bar prep? Like, what did a structured day look like for you?
So for me, when I began studying for the bar exam, graduation was actually on the same week as Memorial Day weekend. So it was graduation on Thursday, Memorial Day weekend, and then Memorial Day. And bar prep had started like 2 weeks before then. And because I was working full time, I slacked off on studying in the beginning, and then it was Memorial Day weekend, graduation. Of course, you have to celebrate, which was something that was very important to me, because I think a lot of us as law school graduates, we're so focused on making sure that we pass the bar that we forget to also celebrate the fact that you graduated. That's very important too. So I wanted to make sure that I celebrated that. So I didn't actually start studying until after Memorial Day weekend. But once I started studying after the weekend was over, I was very regimented about making sure that I studied 8 to 10 hours a day, as if it was a full-time job. I woke up in the morning, ate a nice breakfast, and then I would just make sure that I studied within the blocks of time. Now, statistically, and research shows that our brain cannot consume that much information for long periods of time. So if I would study 3 hours, I would make sure I went and took, a 30-minute break. If I studied for, just as if you were working a job, like you work 3 hours and then you may take a 15-minute break or a 20-minute break, and then I go back to studying. And then I'd make sure that I always took, a lunch and dinner break, because it's important to make sure you feed yourself, and it's important to make sure that you're able to sustain the energy. But as Claire said, the bar is mental. When I took it, and I took it before the pandemic, it was you're in a room, confined to a room, taking a test for about 6 hours on each day. So it's very important that you strengthen your brain to be able to even be able to sit and withstand taking the test for that long. So I just made sure that I calendar everything, whether it be, okay, I'm going to do laundry at this time. I'm going to, if I had to run an errand or a doctor's appointment, everything was calendared. And then for me, it was also a big thing to make sure that I deleted social media from my phone. So I went a complete hibernation from social media, because when I initially started studying, I would find myself studying, and then that's when it was time for me to do everything but studying. Oh, let me go wash the dishes. Oh, I get a notification. Oh, what's on Instagram? So it was just very important that I tried to eliminate those distractions and work strictly on the schedule and the calendar that I had built for myself.
Thank you. And how about you, Claire?
And I just want to second all of that. And then maybe I can speak to something a little more niche, which is like dealing with, you know, you're going to have your schedule, your perfect, if everything goes great schedule, but then things can pop up. Like, for example, a global pandemic and, you know, worldwide protests that you want to go to. And so you don't be afraid to move things around in your day. You'll get, and, you know, as Dorothy said, there are more important things than making sure you do one assignment on one day. And so it'll give you your tasks for the week. And, you know, you can have a general plan of what you want to do. Like, I'm going to study 8 hours today, but then if something pops up, then don't be afraid to push that to the weekend, or push it, you know, like just plan a 3-hour block on a Saturday, because you can get, if you study 8 hours a day, you can have weekends, but don't be afraid to push it to the weekend if you need to. Don't be so rigid in your time that actually gets in the way of your scheduling, of your studying and your, you know, your best, like studying in your best like time. You do want to keep somewhat of a structure, because it, like, as Dorothy said, it's a mental, and you want to prepare yourself for actually sitting there for 8 hours. And that's a big part of what studying for the bar actually is. But at the end of the day, like, small changes can help you be flexible and help you deal with things that pop up. Like, even in the exam, like if you sit next to someone who ends up being coffee, then you will be able to kind of deal with that and adjust, you know, to imperfect situations. And so structuring, the way I ended up structuring my day is I would do the lectures in the morning, and then in the afternoon I would do activities, because for my brain, the lectures are a little bit hard to get through, just because they're so long, and it's like one semester of contracts law in 3 hours, like over 2 mornings. So it's a bit challenging in that respect, but I know my mind works better in the morning, and an interactive thing in the afternoon would really help me. It's easier to focus on an interactive thing where I'm more engaged than a lecture, like saving the lectures to the afternoon where I'm already more tired, and now I have to really try hard to push through that lecture. But for you, it might be different. So I think take 2 weeks or so to figure out what types of assignments you're good at and what types of assignments it requires your brain to use more energy. Schedule your days around that for the rest of the summer. And then another thing I would do, which they don't do in the program, is they have extra, I don't know what jurisdictions everyone's sitting in, but for New Jersey, they had multiple choice essays, and then this thing called the MPT, which is like a practical exam. And they have extras of each of those types of things. And so I actually scheduled those, like sat down and put that in my calendar, like, okay, today I'm going to do an extra MPT. And then in 2 weeks, I'm going to do like real life situation essays. And then I'm going to do an extra multiple choice test. And you can also just schedule a blank space for the one type of assignment that you want to like improve on. I really needed to improve on my MPTs because I'm a really slow reader. So an MPT, you get like a big file and you have to read it all and process it all. And so I was like, I need to sit down and do extra MPTs. And I ended up scheduling that with a friend who I had studied well with in law school. And I knew that he's the type of person who wouldn't freak me out and who wouldn't, undermine my studying. And we scheduled things to hold each other accountable. And I would definitely look into making sure you have time to do the extras in the places where you need like a little bit more help, because that'll like kind of bump you across the finish line and just like make you really comfortable when you sit down for the actual day.
Thank you. So I'm someone who likes to do takeaways in between some sections. I personally am a student who has suffered from ADHD, so I know how important it is to get those little notes in between. And we also have another registrant who has just entered. So just to recap on what we've gone over so far, both Dorothy and Claire have shared with us what bar review programs they used and how they manage their time to be able to complete the necessary portion or percentage of the program so that they could actually have success. And one thing that was emphasized by Dorothy was the importance of giving herself rewards and breaking up her day. So if she spent, 3 hours straight studying, she would give herself 30 minutes for a break. And she would also reward herself for staying committed to her schedule by watching Grey's Anatomy or going to get her nails done, something of that nature. And just making sure that she stayed on top of eating both lunch and dinner so that she had the energy necessary to fuel her during the process. And then Claire also just shared with us the importance of understanding that imposter syndrome can play a role. She shared that with us during the first question, and how important it is to understand that the bar exam is not just about the exam itself and the subjects, but also your mentality and making sure that you're taking care of yourself in a way where you feel confident and you don't put so much pressure on yourself to think that, okay, I have to pass it now or it's the end of the world. And those are really, really important things. So I just want to recap for you all as notes to number one, make sure that you have a structured schedule where you write out a routine, that you allow yourself breaks within each day, those 15-minute breaks, that you create a reward system for yourself. And also, as Claire stated, when you are going through the day, and I'm sorry, I'm having a blank right now. That's that ADHD. But when you are going throughout your day and you're studying, to do the assessment so that you know where your most difficult topic is, and then you can actually add those extra exams in to be able to practice on that. And I think that's really important when you get to that halfway point to know what your difficulty areas are. So that way you're scheduling in that extra time or that extra exam or extra essay to be able to practice either on the weekend or that extra 30 minutes or hour at the end of your study schedule. And so actually going back to Claire shared with us that she took the bar exam online during the global pandemic of that is COVID-19. So she had to study while we were experiencing quarantine. And so Claire, I would like for you to share with us what your experience was like taking the bar exam online and what can students expect and do. And do you have any special tips or information that you'd like to share with them?
So yeah, I think if you're taking it online, you definitely want to mostly do your practice online because again, practice like you play. And I don't know if they've updated the training courses yet, like Barbary, Themis, or Kaplan, but I do know that when I took it, a lot of the times they had integrated, writing notes, which we weren't allowed to have scratch paper for notes. And their essay strategy really relied on this thing. Barbary calls it like the Model T or something, where you like graph out the points of law to the facts that you're going to need. And obviously, if you don't have scratch paper, you can't do that. So especially for the essays, for the multiple choice, you're definitely going to want to practice taking those online. And if you do it online, the course will give you online options. And if you do it, it translates pretty well to the software. And then for doing the essays, I typed all of them in Microsoft Word. And the thing that I changed from their recommended strategy is I would write out my outline just as my answer, because worst case scenario, if you can't finish, then at least you have the outline. At least they know you knew what the answer was. And then the second thing I did was, as I read the call of the question, so I understood what the point of law they were going to ask me about is, I would write out the elements. So if I know they're asking me about negligence, I wrote out duty, breach, causation, and damages. And then as I was reading the facts, I would just type the facts under, like, in that part of my outline as I was reading it, because I think they let us highlight, but it was very like clunky and not like, it wasn't very natural to how you're used to highlighting, and it, in my opinion, wasn't useful. So if I write down the fact, I at least know I won't forget it. And then two, I at least know if I run out of time, the fact will be there. So they know I understood this fact was talking about this element of negligence. And if you practice that over and over again, then you get quite good at it and it won't feel as challenging.
Yes, thank you. And I just want to add to that, that is so important, as Claire stated, to pay attention to time. If you have 30 minutes on a question, spend only those 30 minutes on that question and go to the next question. If you have time left over after you've answered all of the essays, then you can go back to fix something, if it's something minute. But like Claire said, having those facts in there will also highlight for you, okay, this is what I wanted to talk about. But it's very, very important to just move on to the next essay. Because the last thing you want to do is get there the day of thinking you can do what you may have done in law school, which was spend extra time. And then you get to the end of that first session and you already feel defeated because you missed an essay or two because you didn't have enough time. So thank you, Claire, very much for that piece of advice.
I'm sorry, I just thought of something, but just don't forget D's get law licensees. So we're not writing, you know, James Baldwin. It doesn't have to sound beautiful. We're just like, we're just throwing up on the page and moving right along and forgetting it as soon as you're done. So don't worry about being perfect, because you're just trying to get points. It's a partial credit is your friend.
Yes. And Dorothy, although you did not take the bar exam online, do you have any other advice to offer in terms of, you know, that essay writing section, or the actual days of the bar exam?
I think it is really important. One of the things that Barbary stressed was to do as many practice questions and essays as possible. And it didn't matter how early on you wanted to do it, even if you don't think, because I think a lot of us, when we study, we want to ensure that we know it before we take the practice, right? Like if I don't know negligence, I want to make sure I'm studying, whether it takes me 2 weeks, a week to study it. And then when I feel comfortable enough, now I want to take the practice question. But I think it's important that, one, you'll be surprised about how much knowledge you actually know. For me personally, my best friend, because I actually, despite the fact that I didn't take it during the pandemic, I did use my computer when I took it in person. And for me, my best friend, especially when it came to the essays, was the timer. So before I ever started an essay, I always set my timer because I wanted to make sure that whether or not I answered the question completely, baby, it's time to move on. And once that timer hit, I moved on to the next question. And then, as you said, like, and there's going to be some questions that you know, and that you're like, you breeze right through the answer and you can move on. So it was just very important that you utilize the strategies that you have on the platform. And I think, and two, the last thing I would say is find a place that, one, you're comfortable being in, two, that you can concentrate in, that's not going to make you feel uneasy, because I do have, many friends and colleagues who took the bar exam during the pandemic. And one of the things, because I think, when the first round who took it, there was they kind of hyped it up, like even if a dog barks, your test is going to get flagged, and if you move, it's going to get flagged. So it built a lot of anxiety in a lot of my classmates and a lot of my colleagues, because I can't help it if my dog barks in the background. Like, I can try to put him away, but if she hears the car horn, she's going to bark. Now, am I going to be flagged for that? So just keeping sort of those things, because sometimes there's a lot of things that you can't help. There's a lot of things that are out of your control that you can help, but the things that you can control and that you can help, try and help them as much as possible. So whether it be, if it means going to getting a hotel room just for those days where you're going to be tranquil and quiet and able to do the test, then if that's what you have to do, then that's what you have to do. But, just keeping those things in mind, because at the end, you'll get through it. You're going to make it, you'll get through it, and you'll be surprised on the day of the exam how much information you are actually able to retain and how much information you actually know. So
and I think that's a really good point that you bring up, Dorothy, because that's something that's not shared often. A lot of times people talk about the subjects on the test, the amount of stress, but something as simple as knowing that there is a timer in each section of your essay for you to know you spent 15 minutes, now 20 minutes, now 30 minutes on the essay. A lot of students don't know that until they get to the actual exam and they have the software. So being able to know that ahead of time is really beneficial. And I think you also brought really good attention to doing the practice essays before you know the law, because that actually helps you learn the law, because when you go to review the answer, you get the direct, like, 1-line or 2-line law. So that's really beneficial to you early on in the process, because you can then begin memorizing the proper language or the quick language to use in the actual exam. Now, going off of what you said about, having a dog barking and just different circumstances that can kind of raise your anxiety or stress level, I want to start with you, Dorothy, now. In what ways did you engage in self-care during the bar prep period, and how did they benefit your studies as well as your test performance?
So while I was very military about my studying, I am a huge self-care person. I am a huge self-care person. And I think, there's this emphasis when you're in law school that you have to pass the bar, you have to pass the bar, you have to pass it on your first try, that it brings a lot of anxiety and stress during the process. So for me, I always made sure that I took a day off. During the week, I had one day off. And I knew it's the summertime, right? So it's like, you're taking the July bar. February is not so bad because a lot of people might go into hibernation and it's cold. You may not necessarily want to go out a lot. Not to say that one is easier than the other. That's not what I'm saying at all. But I'm saying that sometimes in the summer, there's a lot more external factors that kind of distract you from studying, because it's like happy hour. I want to go out with my friends, Memorial Day, July 4th, like late, all these holidays that are coming up that you want to be able to celebrate and have a good time with your friends. So for me, it was very important that I got to celebrate the holidays I wanted to celebrate. July 4th was very important to me. Memorial Day was very important to me. I knew I wanted to celebrate those holidays. So I compensated when I knew that that time was coming around. I compensated in my studies in other areas to make sure that I allowed myself the time to have that ability. You're not going to be able to go to everything. You're not going to be able to go to every function that your friends invite you to. You're not going to be able to go to every happy hour. You're not going to be able to go out, to every drink. But you should allow yourself an opportunity to take a break. So for me, it was very important that during the week I had one day off, or if it wasn't one day off, one afternoon off. So for me, it would either be my Friday afternoons or my Saturday afternoons. And I would take the time, if I took the whole day, like if I made sure I was good on my schedule and I studied 8 hours as I was supposed to, I would take a whole day off. I would go get my nails done, go to the gym, do whatever it was that made me happy and that gave me time to decompress. And if it was during weeks where something came up and I couldn't necessarily study the 8 hours that I wanted to, then I would just take a half day. But I always made sure that I took some time just to myself. Like, you have to find what it is for you. For me, it's binging stupid TV and getting my nails done, watching Grey's Anatomy, watching 911, watching House. Like, that's what makes me happy. And that's how I decompress, just mindless TV. So I always make sure that I find time to incorporate that into my schedule. And then I continue to study, because your brain is a muscle, and like any other muscle in your body, if you overwork it, it's going to burn out. And when you get towards the end of the Barbie program, you'll start to see that you're like having, you may not necessarily, you feel like you've retained all the information that you could possibly retain. Like, I don't think I could have another thing in this brain, because it's gonna explode. So if you don't find ways to break that up, you'll have burnout a lot earlier than other people. I think you're still muted.
I think you're on mute.
Yes, I'm sorry. I said, and how about you, Clear? And then I said, you're good now. You're unmuted, not realizing it's me.
No worries. I figure if I want to step in there and steal your thunder, I just want to echo what Dorothy just said about making sure that you take, I would say, 1 day a week off, because you have all summer to study. And even if you fall a little bit behind, you will be able to catch up. And then the other thing I would say, in addition to what Dorothy just said, is I found a lot of self-care in communicating with my friends, whether it was like talking in a group chat during the live lectures and being like, oh my gosh, that joke the instructor just said was so funny. Or, I studied with my one friend, and like we had a lot of fun, and every time we would study together, we'd like grab lunch, and like that was fun, and we just talk about things. And that was a big part of my self-care routine during the bar, because it can be isolating. Like, as Dorothy just said, like, you won't be able to do everything that your non-law school friends or your non-bar taking friends are doing, and that can be a bit isolating. So really, like, finding community and people who are studying for the bar is a great method of self-care as well. I think you're on mute again.
So I said, I actually do have some questions based on the information you all just shared, but I'm going to hold them to the end because our participants may actually have the same question, and I don't want to steal their thunder. So I'm going to go on to the next question, which is a little bit more of a deep dive into a special kind of self-care. So this past year, the world experienced COVID-19, and we continue to endure the unjust killing of innocent Black people. As much as we do not want these types of events to happen, not only do they happen, but for Black law students especially, they happen at times that tend to be the worst time, right before exam season. So given the events that have unfolded over the last year and a half, how do you suggest students handle bar prep as well as the impact of societal events on their studies? And whichever one of you want to start, I guess we can start with Clear this time.
Okay, well, so this was a really big issue for me, because I remember it was when I was just about to start studying, it was the first time I saw the video of George Floyd, and that really bothered me. That mixed in, like, obviously it was an awful video, but it kind of made me reflect on all the ways the profession had been unkind to me as a Black woman. And I had been reflecting on that prior to, kind of graduation made me reflect on that. And then the video made its way around the internet. And early on, that it does get in the way. Like, I'm not gonna lie and say it didn't get in the way of me being able to just sit down and focus. And you could really tell the difference between me and my white friends who were just super focused on what was in front of them. And then on top of, I did, and so the long story short about that is me actually attending protests was a way for me to both engage in self-care and, you know, find a way for me to feel like I have agency, so that when it was study time, you know, it was study time. So whatever you do during the year that helps you, you know, process the things that do happen around race, keep doing those things. Like, don't sacrifice those things for extra study time, because that will come back and affect the quality of your study time. And the second thing was, we were also advocating for diploma privilege, because at this time I started learning, well, because obviously the pandemic, and obviously the pandemic made something like the bar exam, which has no relation to legal aptitude, seem silly. The fact that at first they were going to make us take it in person, and that just seems silly, you know, in fact that in light of the fact that the bar exam doesn't really speak to your aptitude as an attorney, which is another reason not to take this test too seriously, especially at first when you're getting questions wrong and you're like, it does not say anything about you and the past 3 years and what you've learned, because the bar exam just does not speak to that. You know, Michelle Obama failed, Hillary Clinton failed, Bobby Kennedy failed, so many people failed. So, and they're amazing attorneys. So the second thing was I got involved in diploma privilege advocacy, and that really helped me kind of have an outlet for some of the things I was feeling, so that when I was sitting down to focus, I could focus. Now, maybe that's not the route for you, because you can't have all these things going on at once. But I think because that's the type of thing I would do in law school, that really helped me focus on schoolwork when you know, racism was rearing its ugly head. You know, I engaged the same coping mechanisms that I did in law school, and I did not let go of them just because I was studying for the bar.
For me, I think it was very important to find comfort in people who looked like me, understood what I was going through, and in the similar predicament. When I was studying for the bar, it was very important, because I think when you're in law school, there is this huge ideology of competition, right? So you have friends in law school, but you guys are all competing, right? It's a curve. This person's competing for this spot. This person wants to be at the top. So while you have friends, sure, you know, there's always this like kind of like looking over my shoulder, because I'm competing with the next person, right? Like, you don't want this person to take your spot, or you know, there's only so many A's that we can have, only so many B's that we can have. Okay, the curve is based on this, the curve is based on that. So it builds this sort of distrust in your colleagues and, you know, in the students around you. So for me, during the time when I was studying, I looked at it as like, listen, we're all trying to pass. Like, at this point, there is no A's, there's no B's, there's no C's, and there's no D's. There's only pass and fail, and we are all trying to get over the pass line. So it was very important for me to find people that I knew could understand like what I was going through, how I was feeling, and then just talk it out. Like, there would be times where we would be studying and something would happen, you know, something would come across, something would happen, and we would take the time to just like, even if we just needed to talk about it and decompress, and we would talk about it, we could decompress, and then we would go back to studying. So like, that was one of the things that I did. And then two, you have, I'm sure a lot of you have mentors in the profession. I'm sure a lot of you, you know, use this time to really build up a good support system. You know, if you have parents who live close by, or family who lives close by, who can, you know, cook you food, like, because sometimes you're studying so much, like you don't even have time to make yourself a meal, or you're like, you're trying to think like, oh my God, I don't even know, I'm my brain is so tired and so fatigued, I can't even think about what I'm going to cook right now. But having somebody who could maybe bring you a meal, that's comfort right there. You know, you may not even realize it, but that's comfort right there. So just using the resources around you, whether it be your law school friends who are also studying for the bar, whether it be your law school friends who may have took the bar before you and that you could ask for advice, or who could talk you through things, and just even people within your community and your family who are going through similar things that you can find comfort in, and speak to them and have them, you know, comfort you in your time of need. Because when you're studying for the bar during this time, any help that you can get is, you know, it's all of it is worth it. All of it is helpful. So take as much as you can.
Yes. And I think that both you and Claire bring out something very important, which is one, having a support system that is so important throughout the entire bar period, but especially in today's times where events are so unpredictable. Knowing that you already have a solidified support system is so important, because when things do arise, even if it's not a societal event, but if it's something like my car broke down and now I can't get to the library and that's really giving me anxiety, knowing that you have that person you can call to say, can you talk me through this moment right now, is so important. Someone that has made themselves available to you throughout your bar period, that's really important. But another thing that Claire brought up was that, you know, our experiences for some of us as Black women or Black people in general within the legal field has not always been the greatest within the profession. And I think that in addition to being able to go to protests as a form of self-care and really being able to express yourself, I think that while you don't want to create pressure on yourself for the bar exam, I think another important thing to do is to allow those moments to also encourage you and push you forward to realize, this is why I'm doing the bar exam. This is why I'm moving forward. You know, at this point, I don't have to worry about competing with anyone else. I don't have to worry about, you know, beating the curve or trying to get within that top percentage or anything. You know, it's about passing or failing, and allow societal events. Of course, you want to allow yourself to process and really have your genuine feelings. But when you're talking about the bar exam, at the end of the day, allow it to be an encouraging factor to you to remember, you know, why our ancestors did what they did and fighting to get us here to this point. And really allow that to encourage you to say, you know what, this has now sparked something within me that makes me want to make sure that I succeed. And I think that's so important for us as Black people, to allow ourselves the opportunity to process, not feel the need to just jump straight into action, but also to not allow any of those types of experiences to make us feel less than about ourselves or our capability or our opportunities to succeed. And so with that being said, I want to actually open it up to our registrants for questions that they might have. So let's see. Okay, well,
I have a question.
Mhm.
As far as organizing your materials, like I'm taking Barbary for prep, and there's like the PDFs that go along with the lectures. Did you print those out? And like, if so, did you use like binders or?
You should be getting a book, and all the PDFs are in the book. So they'll like tell you like, oh, this is your lecture book, and then you just want to find, it's actually not very self-explanatory. So I might like take the day before lectures start, just take a day and match all your books to all the assignments, but you should get everything inside of the book. And then there's like a I guess the like before the lectures, there's like a little outline. I just glanced at them because you'll be going over it again, so you'll never like need it again. At a certain point, I just didn't read the pre-outline because I was going to go through the lectures, and then I like just did the note cards. But honestly, I think my best advice would do whatever is best for you. So maybe if you're used to printing things out, print it out and give it a try. If you don't feel the need to, maybe just give it a try, not print it out, and then adjust based on how it works out for you.
Okay, thank you.
And I'm not sure, I just want to check, but with Barbary, are those booklets, I didn't take Barbary, I took Themis. Are those booklets, the PDFs, are you able to actually tear them out? I know with Themis, we were able to do that. And so that was really good to be able to just carry around that particular section whenever I was going about my day to somewhere else. I don't know if that's the case for Barbary.
Yeah, you have the books, so the lecture books, the ones that when you watch lectures and you actually fill in, like do the fill in the blanks and those things, those you actually get to keep. So if you want to pull them out, tear them out, write on them, highlight them, whatever you want, that is one of the books that you actually get to keep. If you are an individual, because with Barbara, you have the option to keep the full set of books or send them back to get your book fee back. Some people keep the book, some people send them back. If you decide you actually want to send your book back, the books that you write in, the lecture books that you, is one of the books that you actually do get to keep. So you can put it aside. And I actually have my Barbary book, or had my Barbary book in my office. And it was funny because I would be able, sometimes something would come up and I would go back and reference like, oh shoot, this was in Barbie, okay. And it was a quick little cheat sheet sometimes, but that is one of the books that you do get to keep.
Thank you.
I think you're muted again.
I'm sorry. So I was saying, I was asking if anyone else had a question. And if not, I'm going to go ahead and throw this question in here. And if someone does have a question that they think of while I'm speaking, you can just drop it in the chat box. However, I wanted to know how you all spoke about having a support system. And Dorothy, you mentioned, going out with your friends sometimes and just knowing that some events I couldn't go to. If you indeed did this, how did you go about letting your friends know you're entering into bar exam season, what to expect and what you might need from them, especially if most of your friends were not lawyers or law students?
So in the beginning, it was a little difficult because it was when the world was opened up. So, it was there's always a happy hour. The weather is nice. There's always a happy hour. There's always a brunch, and I love brunch personally. That's like one of my favorite things is brunch. So in the beginning, it was a little tough because a lot of times, not even so much from your friends, but even like your family, like even with my mom, I'm studying. And she would call me, well, Dorothy, Mom, I just told you I'm studying. Like, I cannot talk to you right now. Let me call you back. So sometimes it's really hard for people to get it if they're not in it or have not experienced it. But when I first started studying for the bar, I did have a conversation with like all my close friends and all my family just to let them know, like, listen, I graduated law school, but now I have to take a next step in my professional career to be like where I want to be. And this is something that's extremely important to me. So while I want to go out and celebrate and have these great times with you, unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to go to every event that you want me to go to. Now, if there's something that's extremely important to you and that you want me to be there, please let me know in advance so that way I could conform my schedule to be able to try and make it, even if it's like I can't necessarily show up for the whole entire event, or maybe I can just come for an hour, or show my support else some other method that I could do it. But I think after about like a month of studying, everyone sort of kind of realized that like, okay, she's in study, she's in grind mode, I'm not going to bother her. She'll reach out to us when she's ready and when she's fine. And then, we can go from there. So you'll be surprised. It's not even just like your friends. Like a lot of times it's your family because they don't get it, right? Like they get that you're studying and that you're like, okay, I'm going to be studying. But it's like, I understand you're studying, but you can't take my phone call. And it's like, Mom, no, I cannot take your phone call, sis. I have to study, Oh, well, you can't just do this for me. Mom, I would love to do it for you. When I'm done studying, yes, I will try my best. But right now, during this allotted period of time, I cannot. So just being very strict about that, because sometimes you feel like you have to say yes to things, and it's okay to say no. It's okay to say no. If you have something that's going on and you have something that's really important, it's not the end of the world.
Yeah, I just want to echo that, like being very communicative with the people in your life, because if you communicate with them, and it might take a couple of times. Like I know for me, it took a couple of times of me being like today of studying was so bad or whatever, or even just like, you know, connecting with people by letting them know what's going on in your life. For example, today was so boring, I almost fell asleep during my lecture, and just like giving them details so that they can kind of understand and relate, because you might say studying for the bar, but that might not be something they have context for. But like giving them examples of like things that are maybe a bit more specific, that are more common across anyone's experience. I know my dad, he's a psychologist, and he's like, I've taken professional tests before. And I'm like, no, this one's different. And I lived with my parents. So they would come home and I'd be studying in the kitchen, and they'd just start talking and making dinner around me. So having I made sure that my room was a space where I could study, because that was going to be my space that would be open no matter what. So I think you just, especially if you're living with your parents or living with anyone else, like roommates, a significant other, just having a space that you can kind of retreat to when all else fails is going to be important. And even if it's just like, we have a very small apartment, but I'm going to face the wall and put in my headphones, and this is my space of not being bothered. Just kind of figuring out how to even just signal to other people, like when I'm in this space, I cannot talk, is going to be helpful. My mom, I think much like Dorothy's mom, was very had to have a couple of no, I cannot do this, before she realized that studying is going to take a lot of time and concentration. And so it was not necessarily received. I think also sometimes parents have trouble, now that you're grown, thinking that you might be doing something that is hard for adults and not just hard for kids. And so I think what really helped her understand was letting her into my study life, explaining why things were kind of hard. And that kind of helped her come around, because at the end of the day, when she's asking me to do things, it's not that she wants necessarily that specific thing, it's just that she wants, the relationship with her daughter. And so kind of making it a team effort, and making them kind of also invest in your success, I think kind of helps them not necessarily be hurt when you're like, okay, I just need to do my own thing right now, because it's a team.
Yes, I think that Claire raises a very good point, in which the conversation that Dorothy discussed with her friends is really important to have with your family members, especially if you live in the same environment with them or with your roommates, to let them know, I'm going to be studying, this is the type of environment that I'm going to need right now. I definitely can relate. I lived at home during one of the times that I studied for the bar exam, and it was difficult, especially when you're talking about a parent having needs, and you don't want to, overstep those boundaries of respect, but you also want to be very stern in saying, listen, mom, dad, I have to study. I can't do what it is that you need me to do right now. And so having that conversation early on with your family members is really important. And I believe Claire and Dorothy both mentioned having a space just for yourself where you can study. I think Dorothy talked about picking a good space on the day of the actual exam, but I think it's important if you're living with others to have your space designated, so people know this is her study space. And it's equally important to go outside as well. I just thought about that when Claire said, if you can only just face the wall, my desk is actually facing the wall. And so when I'm working from home, sometimes I have to just go outside and take a walk. It's so important to just get some sunlight, get some fresh air, and then get back to studying. But we actually have 2 questions here in the chat box. So the first one is from Amanda Renee. She said, how do you all deal with any distractions while studying? Did you all have to implement any boundaries? If so, what response will you all met with, if any, in doing so? And I just want to add to that, distractions specifically as well, in terms of sitting through a lengthy lecture knowing that you want to be doing something else. You want to text message, or you want to tweet, or you want to get on Instagram. I think in today's society, we have a million forms of distractions.
So I think for me personally, I had 2 distractions. One was my mother. She could not understand the concept of, Mom, I cannot speak to you right now. Like when I would tell her I was studying and I couldn't talk to anyone, she thought that meant I couldn't talk to anyone but her. Like she didn't understand that she was also included in that. So for her, it was more so of I had to talk to her in more so of a rational point of view. Like, Mom, I know that I'm studying, right? And that to you, that means I'm just at home looking at a book and not necessarily anything else. But imagine that this is a job. And if I was on a job, you can't call me 5 times, in 8 hours. Like you can call me at lunchtime. So I had to like make boundaries with her. And I had to explain to her, like, imagine that this is a job. If I'm on a job and I'm working and I'm in my office, I can't pick up your call every single time that you call. When I have a lunch break, I will give you a call. And when, I'm done for the day, I'll give you a call. So with her, it was just sort of like trying to rationalize that with her. And once we got into the motion of her knowing, okay, I can call around noon and then I'll call her around like 5, 6, it got better. And then my second distraction was social media, Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat, even at that point, LinkedIn, like anything just to stop looking at the screen, I was gonna look at it. So in the beginning, I thought I could be disciplined and just like not look at my phone. But the issue was, you'll get that da-da-da-da. So then, oh, you have a notification. And I'm like, oh, I have a notification. Let me see what that is. And then I'm looking at it. Next thing you know, it's been an hour of me just swiping through Instagram, Then I was like, okay, well, maybe I'll just take the sound off. And if I don't hear the sound, I won't look at it. But when your phone is next to you and you get the notification and your screen pops, it goes from being blank, like dark, to now you see, oh, I have a notification. You're still looking through it. So for me personally, I had to just delete it. I didn't delete or deactivate my accounts. I just deleted the apps off my phone. So then that way, even when I did want to flip open my phone, there was no Instagram for me to go to. There was no Snapchat. There was no Twitter. And then, sometimes it's just the distraction of doing everything else but studying, right? And when I had those moments, like there was moments where that was warranted, where it was just like, all right, you're starting to burn out a little bit, just take a break, do something else, and then come back to it with a fresh mind. But if I found myself trying to do that every 20 minutes, then I just had to be disciplined about, Dorothy, you need to sit down and you just need to study. Like, I know it sucks. And that's why I implemented rewards for myself, because I know how I am. So I knew if I had something to look forward to after a block of studying, it would make me more motivated to actually study, because I knew there was something that I wanted to do at the end of it. So those were the different ways that I had to deal with my distraction.
Yeah, I pretty much have the same ways. For me, I didn't end up deleting my Instagram, but my phone is definitely always flipped upside down, so I can't see when it flashes. And that was good enough for me to not be tempted to look at it. And then I would be like, okay, I'm gonna read 20 pages of this review and then check my phone. And that's kind of how, like, my phone ended up being the reward that I would get. So otherwise, I was like always flipped upside down, so I couldn't even see if I got a notification.
Yes. And I think also if you find yourself really, really struggling, even to push yourself when you know you have a reward, another thing you can do is get an accountability partner, whether it be someone who's also studying for the exam or a mentor that you might have within the legal field that can check in on you and say, have you, gotten up to this bit in your studies? What's the holdup? Do you need to have a talk with me? Whatever the case may be, or someone else who's just taking the bar exam as well. And they might, give you a phone call or text message like, hey girl, how much did you get done? I got this amount done. Oh, okay, well, this is what I did to help get this part done. So you might want to do this. It just helps to have an accountability partner. And so Brittany asks, after you took the exam, how did you manage the anxiety of waiting for your results? Which is a really good question.
I think you'll find that you forget about it. And no, okay, so we might have two different personalities here, but I did have a friend who was always texting me and I was like, don't text me about that. Like I literally had to cut some friends out because I kept texting me about this exam. And I honestly just like lived my life, like did everything I wanted to do in the past, like couple times, in the past summer that I didn't get to study. Like I'll show you, I started painting, so like just kind of explore what your life is outside of the exam, because I think you'll find that like just even sitting for that exam and taking that exam is an accomplishment. So I think if you kind of fill your life with other things, you'll find that the days will pass and before you know it, it'll be here.
Yes. For me, after I took the exam, it was out of my mind. You will be so surprised. It was out of my mind. I did not even think about that exam. I did not think about the exam until we got the email that the results were going to be released. So in my jurisdiction in Pennsylvania, they email you. So the results are always released on a Friday at about 3-4 o'clock. So you can't call them. So they always release the exam. They always release the results around Friday at 3-4 o'clock, where they know the office is about to close, so you can't call them to ask any questions, but they send you an email like that Wednesday or Monday before to let you know like, hey, the results are going to be released on Friday, Friday XXX day at this time. So for me, from the point of taking the exam until I received that email, I didn't really think about that exam. It was what it was. You know what I mean? Like you took the exam, you can't go back and change your answers. You can't, like, you're just, personally to me, I felt like it was unnecessary torture. You've already taken the exam, you've already written the questions, you've already answered the multiple choice, you can't go back and change it. So why harbor on what you can't change? So I just lived my life. Fortunately for me, I was working. I know it's easier said than done, especially if you have a position somewhere where your position is contingent on you passing the bar. I know that can be very difficult because, your future depends on this one test. But even then, the world doesn't end, and like the world, life will go on. But you'll be surprised at how much you kind of just forget the test. And then once I got that email, my stomach just sunk. I was just like, oh my God, Lord, I hope I pass this test, because if I have to study for it again, I don't know what I'm gonna do. But it was what it was. And when the results came out, I didn't even check. I had a colleague of mine who actually checked for me, and let me know that I passed, because I couldn't do it myself.
And just piggybacking off of both of those responses, I think one thing that is important to point out, or actually two things, is one, the exam, after those 2 days, you're going to be so tired that first day, you're just going to be relieved to be done with it. Like the next day, you're going to be like, I'm so happy it's done with. You might, go over a little bit in your head, like, oh, I could have did this differently or that differently. But trust me, the only thing you're going to want to do is get away or go to the spa or just be with your friends or sleep. So that's the first thing. And the other thing too is that a lot of people forget if you've already secured a job, you only have about 4 weeks before your job starts. So that's the opportunity for you to get connected with your friends that you haven't been able to hang out with, go on a vacation, relax, and then get prepared for your actual job, and doing whatever you need to do for that, whether it be shopping or just understanding, getting on a routine and things like that. That's different from what you were doing for the bar exam. So honestly, you will quickly forget about the exam because you will be in the next flow of life. And here in Jersey, for most students, they don't start getting anxious until they start seeing other states posting their results and saying I passed. And then it's like, okay, when is it going to come? In Jersey, we don't get an email saying when it's going to be released. You just get an email saying your results are here. And so it's really when other people start releasing their results from other states that a lot of Jersey students start to say, okay, it's about that time is going to come around. But at that point, they also are in the flow of their job, so they can't give too much attention to it either. But do we have any other questions? Okay, well, thank you all for coming to this event. Thank you, Dorothy. Thank you, Claire. I just want to know if you two have any last final words for our registrants before we go ahead and close out this Zoom conference.
I want to say congratulations to everyone. That this, is a great milestone and that it should be celebrated. I understand studying for the bar is, extremely important and that it's a lot of emphasis on making sure that you pass the first time, but, celebrate the fact that you graduated. It's not easy to go through law school, for 3-4 years. And get to this point. So celebrate graduation, celebrating succeeding in that nature, and then you move forward to the bar. And it's okay if you don't pass the first time. It's okay. That doesn't make you any, less smart than what you are, or any less competent than what you are. Of course, try, as long as you put your best foot forward, as long as you know that you studied as much as you could have studied and that you did everything that you could have done. If you don't pass, it's not the end of the world. It's really, really not. But congratulations to everybody and good luck, of course.
Yeah, I just want to echo all of that. I put my email in the chat, so if you have any questions, you can feel free to reach out. And I want to echo all of that. This exam really does not say anything about you. It's just something that you have to do. And honestly, just sitting for it is such a big accomplishment. So just know that, I think throughout this whole process, just make sure that you have confidence in yourself, because that's what's going to really take you to the finish line. It's not, being the smartest. It's not being, the biggest workaholic. It's really just having confidence to know how you learn, how you grasp the material, and to know that you did 3 years of law school so you can do this exam.
Well, thank you all very much. For those of you who haven't seen both Dorothy and Claire, their email addresses are in the group chat. If you haven't been able to get it, don't worry. After this, you all will receive a follow-up email with some of the key takeaways from this, as well as the actual recording and their contact information, the email addresses that they've provided. So you don't have to worry about that. That's another thing that we don't want you to stress about. And I would just say to you all, as it's been advertised, this bootcamp is about wellness. So above all else, put yourself first during this process. This is one of those time periods where you get to be selfish with your time and your energy. This bar exam is about you and your success. So keep that at the forefront of your mind. But thank you all so much. I hope you all enjoyed it and it was of great benefit to you. And if it was, please share both the panel and what you learned from it with your friends, as well as BGLW and the information that we provide in the rest of the bootcamp series. Thank you. Bye.